Not everyone's life looked as colorful as Michael's. It seemed like luck was on his side in everything. He had a large and close-knit family, celebrating every event with joy and extravagance, which wasn't always affordable for other families. He was lucky with his education, getting into exactly where he had hoped. He was fortunate with friends from a young age, and even when he started working, it could confidently be said that he also incredibly lucked out in finding a good company with high pay and a cohesive team. But with his wife, Michael was luckiest of all. Elizabeth had always been an enviable bride, beautiful and intelligent, a wonderful dancer, a kind and cheerful girl who grew into a beautiful woman. From their very first dates, Michael won Elizabeth's heart, trying his best to show her how enchanted he was by her. Every time they met, he would give her a single flower, accompanying each gift with a small card adorned with beautiful words. "You are as beautiful as the bud of this rose. You allure me like a flower attracts a bee." These and many other words he wrote to her while they were still in school. Later, when he could afford to buy whole bouquets and other gifts, he wrote genuine poems comparing his beloved to goddesses and muses who had inspired mortals throughout history. "Your eyes shine brighter than the stars," he whispered to her every time they walked late into the evening. Elizabeth liked to hear this, and she loved Michael for those romantic gestures with which he was always ready to shower her. Many hearts were broken by Elizabeth's choice of Michael as her spouse. For many years, they rejoiced and grieved together, enduring many trials both during their studies and afterward in their respective workplaces. Years went by, and these two never parted. Finally, Michael proposed to Elizabeth. When he did, he couldn't imagine she would agree. He was afraid she would realize that she could find a man much more attractive and wealthy, and although he carefully planned the day, starting with dinner at a new restaurant Elizabeth had been eager to visit and ending on the waterfront under bright bursts of fireworks, he was so nervous that he even forgot to kneel. As soon as he saw Elizabeth's eyes reflecting the flashes of fireworks launched into the dark skies, he drowned in them, completely forgetting about the words he had prepared and the traditional gesture he was supposed to make before asking her this incredibly important question. "Marry me," he exhaled, catching the gaze of her bottomless dark eyes burning with overflowing happiness. She agreed without hesitation, not even noticing that he hadn't knelt before her. For her, the main thing was that he finally asked her the question she had been dreaming of for years on end. Michael's joy knew no bounds. Elizabeth chose him. They had a rich wedding in every sense. Both of their extensive families celebrated for several days, joyfully and loudly rejoicing in their union. At first, Michael feared that their fiery relatives would find a reason to quarrel, but seemingly, everyone forgot their disagreements. After the honeymoon, although their married life continued to be smooth and harmonious, something just didn't work out. Their parents didn't pressure them much about having children, but they hinted that they would like to see grandchildren. However, months passed, and Elizabeth still couldn't get pregnant. For the first few years, Michael didn't express his dissatisfaction. After all, there could be many reasons. He even spared no expense on doctors, but they said that both spouses were healthy and the absence of a child could be due to the stress they both experienced at work. Michael became even more attentive to Elizabeth. He started taking her out for romantic dinners and dates more often, showered her with gifts, and organized the most relaxing vacations he could. Thanks to his attention and care, his beautiful wife blossomed even more, much to the envy of the wives of all his colleagues and acquaintances. Everything would have been fine, but colleagues as well as their wives began to whisper behind Michael's back. "Look, she bought a new dress." They pointed to Elizabeth, who came to Michael's workplace. "Spending money again. Poor thing, probably she'll leave him soon for someone else. Look at how she looks. Some wife she is, can't even give him a child." At first, Michael didn't listen to all this, but over time, every such word began to slowly undermine him from within. He could have been influenced by all these rumors and speculations, but one day, Elizabeth rushed to him at work, radiant with joy. He was used to them having lunch together quite often, but for the first time, he saw her so smiling and glowing. "Michael, I have wonderful news. I'm pregnant," Elizabeth told her husband without waiting for them to be alone. Whatever doubts crept into Michael's soul, this news alone made him forget about everything. They had been trying for so long to have a child that he had already given up hope. But a miracle happened, and Elizabeth blessed him with the most beautiful news she could give him. Enthralled by this, Michael forgot about all the rumors and doubts for a long time. He again carried her in his arms and showered her with various gifts. Happy, they turned one of the rooms into a nursery, and Michael allowed Elizabeth to choose any decorations and colors she wanted to see. And when they found out during a visit to the doctor that they were expecting twins, Michael was ecstatic. All the years they spent without children were rewarded, and with twins, he always wanted a large family, and twins were not an obstacle but rather added to their happiness, especially since the twins turned out to be a boy and a girl. He enjoyed the new life with his beautiful wife and couldn't get enough of her smiles. Finally, their family would be complete with the birth of the children. The nursery was filled with things now. Instead of one crib, there were two, and the room was equipped in a way that many of their visiting guests envied. On the day when Michael brought Elizabeth home from the hospital with the twins, he felt like he was on cloud 9 with happiness. Although many of his colleagues and comrades wouldn't understand him, he spent a lot of time with his wife and children, helping Elizabeth with what usually fell exclusively on women's shoulders. Even their own mothers scolded him for such behavior. But Michael didn't care because he shared with Elizabeth the care for their children. Seeing her smile and the smiles of his children was more important to him. What could possibly be wrong? Michael would come home from work to loving children and a wife who quickly regained her shape after childbirth. However, less than a year had passed before rumors began to spread again, and Michael could no longer easily brush them off. The children didn't resemble him at all. Elizabeth regained her figure too quickly, and his wife looked just as beautiful and sexy as before pregnancy. Not a day went by when Michael didn't hear something similar at work, and although his colleagues tried to speak quietly about it, and how does he not see this? The children are curly-haired, but he and Elizabeth are not, whispered one colleague. No, it's impossible to regain your figure so quickly, another colleague whispered, condemning how quickly Elizabeth had regained her slimness. It's all because this flirt has someone to impress, another one gossiped. Michael began to doubt. Was it all just like that? Maybe those who gossiped behind Elizabeth's back were right, and she wasn't as simple as he would like to think. He started to pay closer attention to the children. Indeed, their skin was lighter, their eye shape didn't resemble his, and their hair was curly, not straight like his and Elizabeth's. And then he noticed that Elizabeth was becoming more and more secretive. Seemingly, she still smiled, still tender and caring towards him, still ready to listen and advise, but something had changed in her. Sometimes she would leave the room to take a call and no longer leave her phone lying around, always carrying it with her. Once, he couldn't help but accidentally overhear one of these conversations. "I get goosebumps every time he speaks," Elizabeth breathed out with a soft chuckle. "Oh, and when he takes off his shirt, oh God, what a man!" These words troubled Michael, and he pondered. He hadn't found time to properly take care of himself and return to training. He used to regularly run and engage in sports, but now he didn't do it because of tiredness after work. He began to think that Elizabeth was definitely hiding something from him. At first, he didn't even know how to approach the situation that had arisen, and he hesitated for a long time before gathering the courage to ask her directly. "Elizabeth, are you hiding something from me? I noticed that you started taking your phone with you, and now you only take calls when leaving the room." "What do I have to hide, darling?" She smiled in response, hugging him. "I have nothing to hide." Then explain why you started taking your phone with you instead of leaving it lying around. "I've become more responsible, that's all. You yourself scolded me for always losing it. And with the kids, the phone has become useful. I can watch over the little ones when they sleep and not miss when they need my attention. And the calls? You used to always talk in front of me, but now you always leave. Darling, do you really want to hear about diapers and onesies or the TV shows I chat with my mom and friends about? After a long day at work, I understand that you're tired. Even though you help me with our little angels in the evening, I'm the one on maternity leave now and you should rest." "I understand that," Michael waved off. Her responses sounded quite reasonable, and Michael accepted them, though he harbored suspicions that it was all just a cover for something else. Doubts began to gnaw at him even after their conversation. Though Elizabeth habitually reached out to him, showering him with attention and affection, he grew somewhat distant towards her. Too much of what Elizabeth did seemed suspicious to him. Then he heard new rumors about his wife at work. "I'm telling you for sure, I saw Elizabeth with some man, and they were hugging," whispered one of Michael's female colleagues to another right in front of everyone. "Oh my God, should we tell Michael?" "He's such a good man," the other replied. "How do I even tell him? For God's sake, he'll call me a gossip. He loves that little flirt so much." Michael didn't tell his colleagues that he overheard their conversation, but he deeply pondered over all the signs of infidelity he had seen in his wife's behavior. Over the next few weeks, he contemplated how he could understand what was really happening with his wife. He was cautious and didn't seek advice from friends or colleagues. Instead, he turned to the internet, where he easily found ways to catch his wife in the act. He read various accounts from people who had been in similar situations, memorized possible methods of testing Elizabeth's loyalty, and gradually began to plan when and how to execute the most crucial test of his life. As much as he feared being one of those men who discovered the cruel truth about their spouse's infidelity, he still resolved to do it. The simplest method, he noted for himself, was to write Elizabeth a farewell letter, hide, and see what she would do when she read it. However, as he sat down with a sheet of paper and a pen in front of him, Michael couldn't figure out how to write the letter. Beautiful and warm memories of their love flooded his mind, of how they rejoiced together in any event, and how happily they had lived for many years. For a long time, he sat there trying to write at least a few lines. Time after time, he failed, crumpling up the started letter and starting a new one. Finally, he managed to gather his thoughts and express everything in a way that the letter seemed sincere and not too harsh towards Elizabeth. He didn't mention his suspicions, but stated in the letter that he didn't feel the same as before when he was with her. He confessed to her that her detachment made him feel the need to be alone with himself and reflect on the situation. He ended the letter by saying that he still loved her. Michael hoped that this letter would, if not make Elizabeth repent for her transgressions, at least make her think about what she had done. But deep down, he also hoped that he was wrong. He desperately wanted their life to return to normal. Although he saw unfamiliar traits in their children, finally, Michael chose a day when he took time off from work and placed the prepared letter in the most visible place while Elizabeth wasn't home. She had gone somewhere with the twins. This gave Michael enough time to find a suitable hiding spot where she wouldn't find him. He chose a wardrobe as a hiding spot, positioned conveniently enough to overhear conversations throughout most of the house. Concealed within, he tried not to dwell on what might happen if Elizabeth suddenly decided to peek inside. When his wife returned, Michael heard the rustle of paper and a prolonged silence as Elizabeth read his letter. He began to think the silence was lasting too long, but then came the sound of the letter hitting the floor, followed by a quiet sob. Elizabeth was crying. Michael almost smiled, ready to exhale with relief, but then he heard the woman retrieve her phone from her purse and dial a number. "Hello," she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael froze, listening intently, and suddenly realized the woman whispered a man's name. "Yes, Diego?" she said. Michael couldn't believe his ears. His beloved wife Elizabeth was cheating on him. Elizabeth sobbed but continued speaking very softly, barely audible. "Are you coming?" "Okay, Diego, I'll wait." Michael clenched his fists, unable to believe such treacherous betrayal. He loved her so much, worshipped her, showered her with gifts, did everything for her, and she betrayed him. Suddenly, Elizabeth spoke again. This time it seemed she was talking to someone completely different. "Gabriel, everything's so bad," Elizabeth said. "Michael left me. Do you understand, Gabriel? What should I do?" For a while, she listened to the man on the other end of the line, then sighed. Elizabeth's voice quieted briefly, and she seemed to gradually calm down. But after a couple of minutes, she picked up the phone again. "Pablo, it's me," Elizabeth whispered with a breaking voice. "Yes, no, it's something else." Michael didn't know what to think anymore. 3 men. How was she managing to juggle affairs with 3 men behind his back? Yes, no, it's not worth it. Elizabeth's voice seemed to drive another nail into Michael's heart with every word. He felt the ground give way under his feet when he realized that his wife, who was supposed to be his support and best friend, had betrayed him. He continued to listen, unable to break out of his hiding place, but every second in that closet seemed like an eternity to him. When she finished talking, the house fell into an ominous silence. Michael, unable to stand it, decided to come out of his hiding place. He slowly opened the closet door and walked out, face to face with his wife. She started in surprise. Her eyes were full of tears. "Michael, what are you doing here?" Her voice was trembling. "I heard everything," Michael said, trying to stay calm even though he was seething inside. "Who are these people, Elizabeth? Who are these men?" Elizabeth tried to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. Michael couldn't stand it and came closer to her. "Tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? And who is the father of our children?" His voice was full of despair. Elizabeth shook her head, not knowing where to start. She sank down on the sofa and covered her face with her hands. I do not know how it happened, Michael," she whispered. "I'm confused. I was so lonely when you were all wrapped up in your work and worries about the future. I was just looking for comfort, support, but everything got out of control." Michael was silent, unable to believe his ears. He felt his world crumbling, everything he loved and aspired to disappearing. "And our children?" he asked without taking his eyes off Elizabeth. "They're yours, Michael," she said firmly. "You have to believe me. I know how it looks, but they're yours. I've been doing tests to make sure. I didn't want you to suffer to find out about everything like this." Her words sounded convincing, but Michael couldn't completely trust them. There were too many lies and deceptions. But he decided to give himself and her a chance. "Okay," he said finally, "I believe you, but we need to change everything. We need to work on our relationship, on trust. If you really want to be with me, you have to stop all this." Elizabeth nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes, Michael. I promise. I love you, and I don't want to lose our family." These words gave Michael hope. Maybe they can really fix it. But he knew that they had a difficult path ahead of them, full of trials and work on themselves. Only time will tell if he will be able to forgive and forget. But one thing was clear. He wasn't ready to give up so easily. For the sake of the children, for the sake of the love he once felt, he was ready to fight. So, a new stage in their lives began, full of difficulties and attempts to regain lost trust. Michael and Elizabeth decided to turn to a family psychologist to work on their problems together. Every day they learned to trust each other anew, learned to be more open and honest. Their path was not easy, but they knew that it was necessary for the sake of preserving their family. After a few months, slowly but surely, they began to see the results of their work. Their relationship became stronger, and the children delighted them with their achievements and happy laughter. Michael felt like part of a family again, where love and understanding reigned supreme. One evening, when the children were already asleep, Elizabeth approached Michael, who was sitting on the porch of their house. "Thank you for giving us a chance," she said softly, sitting down next to him. Michael looked at her and smiled. "We all deserve a second chance. The main thing is that we continue to work on this together." Elizabeth nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat in silence, enjoying a moment of peace and intimacy that seemed so far away a few months ago. And although there was still a lot of work ahead, they knew that together they could cope with any difficulties. In the end, their love and desire to keep their family together proved to be stronger than all the trials. Several years have passed. Michael and Elizabeth overcame many difficulties and were able to regain their lost trust. Their relationship has become stronger and more mature. They have learned to talk openly about their feelings and support each other in all situations. A family psychologist helped them sort out their emotions and taught them how to deal with conflicts, not destroying, but strengthening their union. Michael also revised his priorities. He began to devote more time to his family, spending all his free evenings and weekends with his children and wife. They traveled together, played sports, had picnics, and just enjoyed each other's company. The atmosphere of love and mutual understanding reigned in the house again. Elizabeth, in turn, realized how important it is to be honest and open. She stopped looking for solace on the side and focused on strengthening her relationship with Michael. Their joint efforts were not in vain. They became a real team, supporting each other in everything. The children grew up in an atmosphere of love and care. They saw their parents working on their relationship, and it became an example for them. The eldest son, watching his father cope with difficulties, became more responsible and attentive. The daughter learned to be open and honest, like her mother. One day, when Michael and Elizabeth celebrated their wedding anniversary, they recalled the difficult time when their marriage was on the verge of collapse. They were sitting on the veranda of their house, enjoying a quiet evening and talking about life. "Do you remember how hard it was?" Michael asked, holding Elizabeth's hand. "I thought we would never be able to overcome all this." "Yes, I remember," Elizabeth replied. "But now I understand that these trials have made us stronger. We learned a lot and began to understand each other better." "It's true," Michael agreed. "We were able to regain lost trust and learn to be honest. And now I know that our love has withstood all the tests." Elizabeth smiled and snuggled closer to him. "I am grateful to you for not giving up, for giving us a chance and believing in us." Michael kissed her on the forehead and said, "I couldn't have done anything else. You and the kids are the most important thing in my life, and I will fight for our happiness to the end." They sat hugging under the stars, realizing that they still had many happy moments and joint achievements ahead of them. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was through hardships and overcoming them that they became a truly strong and happy family. And so many years later, when the children grew up and left their parents' house, Michael and Elizabeth were left alone, enjoying quiet evenings and long conversations. They knew that their love had stood the test of time, and that together they would be able to cope with any difficulties that might arise in the future. Life went on, bringing new challenges and joys, but one thing was clear. Michael and Elizabeth became an example for many who saw in their story proof that true love is able to overcome all obstacles. And let there be many more trials ahead of them, they knew that together they would be able to cope with any difficulties and preserve their happiness for many years to come.